share our friendship and to study Torah together. And I agree with Mark on most things, but I'm going to disagree with him now about the nature of the somberness at this time of the year. I think it's a joyous time of the year, actually. I know it's counterintuitive. What Mark said is standard procedure is that now it's supposed to be somber. Maybe I don't even disagree with you so much, but for argument's sake, I'm going to disagree. Before I begin, and I will tell you why actually it's not a somber time. But before I begin, I wanted to ask any of you if there's any questions that you might have or any comments you want to make. No? Everybody knows everything already?
We're about to.
There's nothing that bothers you about Yom Kippur? Okay, so let me tell you why it's a joyous time. First of all, let me tell you why I'm so sure that I'm right. And then let's try to make sense out of that. There's a statement of the Talmud that says, Lo yihoyu yomim tovim liyisrael. There were no greater or more joyous days for the Jewish people, and 2 days are listed. The first day is Chamisha Asa B'Av, the 15th day of Av, which barely makes itself onto the radar for most Jewish people today. It's made a bit of a comeback in Israel, and that's a subject for another evening. But the other day is very, very popular, and it's a big day on the Jewish calendar. It's Yom Kippur. When I was a kid, it was very common to meet 3-day-a-year Jews, or so they would call them. People who came to shul 3 days a year. I have to tell you that in my industry, I have come to the realization that people who used to be 3-day-a-year are now 1 hour a year. And I say this with sadness, not with joy. It's very sad for me, but there are people now that I won't see 3 days a year. 25 years ago when I started, I would see people 3 days a year. There are people now I'm seeing 1 hour a year, if they stay for the hour. And that's Kol Nidre or Ni'ilur. The point is, it's a big day. It's, I guess, the last thing to go is going to be Yom Kippur, and then it's really scary. Then I won't be seeing people at all, some people. But the Gemara says that this was one of the most joyous days of the year. In fact, on par with the day of Chamisha Asa B'Av. Now, why Chamisha Asa B'Av, the 15th day of Av, is joyous, is a subject for another day. But the question, and this is a very real question, is the Talmud seems to indicate that Yom Kippur was one of the 2 most joyous days of the year. And most people don't tend to think of Yom Kippur as joyous. By way of illustration, there was a man who got up at his 60th anniversary dinner, and there was a huge crowd, and he got up and he said, my dear wife, and everybody got very quiet because they were known not to have such a great marriage, but they stuck it out. He said, it's 60 years of marriage. He said, darling, it's felt like 2 days. 60 years, it felt like 2 days. And a hush falls on the crowd, and people are quite surprised to hear him speaking so romantically. And he says, yes, Teshuvah and Yom Kippur. It's a joke, but people tend to think, okay, laugh now. Thank you. People tend to think of Teshuvah as a somber or sad day, and it is. And people tend to equate Teshuvah and Yom Kippur. On both of these days, we fast for over 25 hours. On both of these days, there are things that we don't engage in, like washing ourselves and taking care of our everyday needs. We're kind of living in a different space for a day, and people tend to conflate the two. Teshuvah and Yom Kippur. Yet Teshuvah is without a question the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, and the Talmud seems to indicate that Yom Kippur is the most joyous of days. So I mean, David can tell you, he's been to our show. It's pretty joyous in Chabad Flamingo.
Oh yeah.
You've also been there.
Yes.
Did you feel any sadness?
Sometimes.
Really? I didn't ask you if you felt hunger. You felt sad. You felt sad in our show?
When it was over.
No.
Maybe when I spoke for too long. You felt sad. You know, on the first day of Yom Kippur, in the middle of my sermon, I lost my voice. It was the strangest thing. Never happened to me in 25 years. I couldn't get any noise out. When I finally managed to get something out, I said, "Who was praying for me to lose my voice?" I said, "I just want to ask you to pray for somebody who needs a refuah shlema. Your prayer seems very effective." But in seriousness, you were there. It's joyous, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why do we have this dichotomy? Why do some people think of Yom Kippur as a sad day? Other people think of it as a joyous day. What is Yom Kippur really about? What are these days leading up? These are called Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, which Mark intuitively said are solemn days. Days of they're called days of awe, Yomim Noraim. The year begins with days of awe, and then it metamorphoses and moves into days of joy. The question is, are we supposed to be somber during these days? Are we sad about something? Are we worried about something? If you have somber days, how would they climax in joy? If Yom Kippur is the climax of Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, it's the final day. If these are somber days, then it should be most somber, not least somber.
Mm-hmm.
And one more little question. I'm supposed to talk about Teshuvah, right? I'm gonna call Teshuvah soul rehabilitation. Call it soul rehab. That's my nickname for Teshuvah. Teshuvah, many people think is repentance. I think that's a big mistake, because repentance indicates that you're becoming somebody else, becoming something else. And Teshuvah is quite different. You don't have to become somebody else. You actually have to return to being yourself. You have to realize your natural potential. That's what Teshuvah really means. Teshuvah means in Hebrew means return. So we have to restore or return to something. What if I wasn't ever very pious? What if I was never devout? What am I returning to? What if I wasn't raised with any Yiddishkeit? Am I returning to nothing? So yeah, I have to do Teshuvah. So where are we going back to? But that's the meaning of the word Teshuvah.
Teshuvah means return?
Yeah. Tashuv. Lashuv. Think about it. Shiva. Shivat Tzion means to come back to Zion. We left Zion. The Shavei Tzion came back to Zion. It means to return.
Mark's nodding. I'll take his.
I mean, that's what the word means.
So like
Yeah,
Shuva
there's
Banim.
Lashuv means to
Very
return.
true.
Very
means,
close to
yeah.
a community called Shavei Darom,
Right.
and they were the descendants from a place called Kfar Darom, the Gaza Strip. You know,
And
they call themselves Shavei Darom.
it's without a question that the word
And
Teshuvah
returning to
means
Darom.
returning. Right? So that has to be understood. And it really here's is the most important question that I want to pose tonight and try to hopefully answer to some degree. Teshuvah means to return, or in a very literal way means to kind of go away from a path of folly and come back to a path of righteousness. You're regretting something that you did was inappropriate. You're resolving to behave more differently. That's the technical Webster definition of teshuvah, if you want to know what's actually expected of us. Do teshuvah means to regret and resolve. In the language of our sages, charata al ha'ava, to regret the past, kabbalah tova al haba, to accept upon ourselves to do something differently in the future. A simple example, if you had a dispute with somebody, maybe you behaved inappropriately, and you feel bad about it. So what are you going to do? You can try to fix it. So you'll come over to this person and say, you know, I said something I shouldn't have said. I embarrassed you in public. I really regret that. And then what might you say? If somebody is sincere, they regret having done something to hurt you, having offended you, what might you say? You might say, well, that's nice. I accept your apology. Apology accepted. And what if the person says, I'm planning to do it again next week, but I really regret doing it last week, and you know, when I do it again next week, I'm sure you'll be okay with that. So no, I'm actually not okay with that. I was really offended and I was hurt by it. I don't want you to do that again. I said, well, I'm sorry. I can't promise I'm not going to do it again. This is who I am, and I intend to do that all the time. But last week, I regret what happened last week. So that's clearly insincere. If the regret doesn't come along with resolve, if I only regret what I did, but I'm not resolving to change, that's not really teshuvah. And teshuvah means when we say, you know, God, I feel bad. I damaged our relationship. I regret it. And because I regret it, I'm resolved to do it differently on the go forward. So that's what teshuvah literally means. When is a person obligated, if you will, to do teshuvah? Which, by the way, happens to be one of the 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. The technical mitzvah, according to most opinions, is to verbalize before God, not before people. That's not a Jewish thing. But to verbalize before God, dear God, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Al chet shechatanu. I've done X, Y, and Z. We give you a long list, a litany of different things. Look for yourself in there. You should find yourself multiple times in the long list of al chet. And even though everybody's saying the same words, everybody also buys the same Hallmark cards. You have to identify with those words. You have to think about the specifics when you look at those words and say those words. And you have to actually express remorse and regret before God and say, God, I'm resolving to do differently. I'm going to work really hard at trying to behave in a different fashion in the new year. But when does a person become obligated, if you will, if it's a mitzvah, when do you become obligated to do teshuvah? say I had a ham sandwich for lunch. I didn't, by the way, in case. But say I had a ham sandwich for lunch. So I would say, wow, it's good because Yom Kippur's in a few days and we'll get through Teshuvah. But if I had a ham sandwich a day after Yom Kippur, oh boy, I have to wait like a whole year to do Teshuvah now. I have to live with this guilt of the ham sandwich? Can I not regret it and resolve never to do that again? I just chose a sin that I know nobody had a ham sandwich for lunch, so I'm just choosing so little. Would I have to wait a whole year?
No.
No. When would I do Teshuvah? If I had a ham sandwich, I would probably regret it immediately. So if I regret it and resolve not to do it again, what would you call it? That's called Teshuvah. What if it's the 11th day of Tishrei when that happened? Great, I did Teshuvah. When does God accept my Teshuvah? When you do it. Why would Teshuvah be limited to like a certain day of the year? It's like, load up on sin, see how many things you could do wrong, because we're going to regret it later. And then, after you've done everything you possibly could have imagined you wanted to do, now, phew, it's time to be somber. So let's be miserable for a couple of days. Sounds very Jewish. And then we'll regret it, right? And then we'll do Teshuvah. And then, phew, now God has forgiven me. I can go back to my old ways. Does that make any sense? Do people sometimes maybe do that? Like, get all serious on Yom Kippur and then maybe it lasts a day or two, maybe 3 or 4. Maybe they pull the inspiration into the sukkah maybe, and then, once Simchas Torah is over, I gotta go back to my old ways. It wouldn't even make sense. Forget that it doesn't work. This doesn't make sense. Why should Teshuvah be attached to a particular day of the year? Teshuvah should be attached to the reality at hand. If I didn't do any sins, I don't have to do Teshuvah. Great. No? I mean, this whole thing really doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting statement which is made in the Gemara, in Masechet Shkagot, on page 13. It's a statement that's made by one of the greatest rabbis who ever walked the face of the earth. His name was Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda. He's more commonly known as Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, which would approximate as Rabbi Yehuda the president or Rabbi Yehuda the prince. And he was like, Mick Jagger is like rock and roll royalty. He was like rabbinic royalty. Okay, he didn't have a scepter. He didn't command an armed forces. He didn't print currency. He didn't strike any coins. But he was revered by hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Jewish people. And they would have done anything that he would have wanted. And they did. And they followed him like people would follow a sovereign without having anybody, if you will, enforcing his laws. And he was a great-grandson of one of the greatest rabbis of all time, named Hillel. Hillel was Shavei Tzion. Hillel was a descendant, maternally, of King David. So he had some royal blood, although technically he would not have actually been an heir to the throne, but he was seen to have very impressive lineage. And seen as Jewish aristocracy, and he came from Babylon. But of course his family originally came from Jerusalem. He had come from Israel. I was once walking into the old city, and there was an Arab shopkeeper out in the front. And I watched something very interesting happen, and he says, "Where are you from?" And the guy says, "Oklahoma." "I am from Jerusalem," he says. Asks him, "Where are you from?" He says, "New York City." "I'm from Jerusalem." "Where are you from?" This guy says, "LA." And then the man comes and he says, "Where are you from?" And the man is clearly an American citizen, turns around and he says, "From Jerusalem," he said. "We left a few thousand years ago, now we're back to state." That's really where we're from. Like, we're from Israel. So when Hillel comes back, Hillel doesn't go to Israel, he comes back to Israel. As Elie Wiesel once wisely remarked, when a Jew comes to Jerusalem, it's a homecoming, he said. It's a homecoming. When people go to Israel the first time, and you've been to foreign countries, and you go to a foreign country and it's unwieldy. You have to get used to what's going on around you. But when a Jew comes to Israel, most often you just feel like you're home. It just feels natural, because it is natural. That's who we organically are. So Hillel comes back from Babylon, where he was born and raised for generations, and he's acclaimed, and that's a story in and of itself, but beyond the purview of the time we have tonight, is acclaimed as the great leader of the Jewish people. And Hillel is the great lover of Israel. He's a great lover of Israel. He has a protagonist, his name is Shammai, also a tremendous sage. And these two luminaries become the rabbinic leaders, the great rebbes, who set the course of Judaism for decades, for more than a century. After their passing, people identified as being either Bet Hillel or Bet Shammai. A chassid of Hillel, a chassid of Shammai. These were such great rebbes. They lived for decades. That almost terrestrially. They were like almost alive. They didn't bury, but they were almost alive because people related to their inspiration and their guidance and their teaching. And Hillel emerges as the greater leader of the two. And he is the Nasi, is the leader of the Sanhedrin, and his family becomes known as Jewish aristocracy. A new term is coined. Only one other person ever had such a title. His name was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and that's another story. But Rabban is a conjunction of two Hebrew words, Rebbe and Nasi. And Rabbi Yehuda is the seventh generation from this great Hillel. And this Rabbi Yehuda, he's the man who makes the fateful decision to commit the oral traditions of Torah into a canon of sorts. That's called a Mishnah. So we had writings, but they were like apocryphal writings. They were like the oral Torah, written some of them even in biblical times, but they weren't formally, nobody had struck a formal code. But the Mishnah becomes the formal code, the body of Jewish law. And Rabbi Yehuda, you're talking a major figure in Jewish thought and literature and philosophy and law. You know what he said about Yom Kippur? He said, Itzumo shel Yom Mechaper. The essence of this day, it atones. The word mechaper in Hebrew is like the notion of wiping something clean. Like you wash the dishes and then you just have to wipe it clean. So this is or lechapure. You wipe something clean, some grime on it, there's some dust, you just want to wipe it clean. This is called lechaper. The terminology Hebrew. Atonement is literally to wipe it clean. So Hillel said that Yom Kippur comes along, so say this is us. What's anthropomorphically is God's hand, right? And God we're all clean. Just like that, we're all clean. He said, Itzumo shel. So what happens on Yom Kippur? What do you do? Oh, he says, nothing. He says, Yom Kippur comes along, and Yom Kippur in and of itself atones, which cleanses us. Obvious question. What does that mean? What do you mean it just cleanses us? How? As a rule in Judaism, we have to work for things. Nothing comes for free. The most powerful agent or ingredient in life is the freedom to choose. We celebrated Rosh Hashanah just a couple of days ago. What were we celebrating? What's Rosh Hashanah? The New Year. Okay, great. Can you be a little more specific? The Chinese New Year, the Persian New Year, the Jewish New Year. What does it commemorate? Well, we have these dates that commemorate something. Does it commemorate something or what does it commemorate?
Jewish New Year.
The Jewish New Year. Must be something very Jewish happened on this day, right?
We crown the king.
We crown the king. That's what we do. But what happened on this day? With which Jewish event? Let me make it easy for you. On Passover, we became born as a nation. God took us out of Egypt, okay? From a nation, from the bowels of another nation. Lakachat lo go, mikarav go. We come out, we're born. That's our national birthday. On Shavuot, we commemorate the fact that God gave us the Torah, and we received the Torah. We also had a part in that. We could have said no. We might not have been around to see the next day, but it was Matan Torah, Kabbalat Torah. A big thing happened on this day. It's a Jewish day. On Sukkot, nothing actually happened. So why do we celebrate Sukkot? Well, Sukkot, we celebrate the miracle of our survival in the desert for 40 years. You could call it our childhood. We had a very, very obnoxious childhood. For 40 years, we did nothing but kvetch and complain and were miserable almost through the entirety of it. Even though we had every single one of our needs provided for, we didn't stop kvetching for almost a moment. And poor Moses had to put up with us. And he carried us, he said, like a baby. And the last day of his life, we actually kvetched also, and he was delighted to hear about it. You know why? Because after 40 years, we finally kvetched about something good. We complained to say, how come we didn't get a Torah? Moshe Rabbeinu gave a Torah to the Levites, and the rest of the tribe say, hey, we want a Torah too. That's actually this week's Torah portion. That's what it's about. So we had this miraculous reality. I once saw somebody did the numbers of what it would have cost and how difficult it would have been to provide for the approximately 3 to 3.5 million Jews who left Egypt. We know those numbers because there are censuses. The census is males between the age of 20 and 60. Okay, so if there was males between 20 and 60, it had to be females. So we're now at 1.2 million. We know there's a lot of children. they're not counted. Okay, and we know there's a lot of older people. In fact, Moses himself was not counted because he was 80 years old. He was 20 years past the census. So if you do the numbers, the math, it cannot be less than 3.5 million people, and it could have been more than that. Do you know how many tractor trailers a day it would have taken to feed 3.5 million people? Something like 70,000 tractor trailers a day of food. Somebody who worked for the armed forces figured this out. What it costs to feed people, how to truck that much food in. I mean, the logistics of feeding 3.5 million people daily. How many armies got bogged down because they couldn't supply food for the armed forces? I mean, the Russian winter consumed Napoleon and Hitler, but that's because they didn't have 3 million soldiers there. The trains were going, the partisans were blowing up trains. They couldn't bring supplies fast enough. We lived like this for 40 years. It's a pretty serious miracle. Most people don't even think twice about that. Make a big deal out of a little miracle that happened. Okay, so we get an 8-day holiday. We get 7 days of Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret. We're not celebrating an event. We're celebrating an era, an epoch. 40 years of miracles. Okay. Hanukkah, everybody knows, it's not biblical. Celebrates a great event. Maccabean revolt, the reclamation of Jerusalem, great Jewish Purim. It's a Jewish event. What happened on Rosh Hashanah? Which big Jewish event happened on Rosh Hashanah? Anybody know? I'll tell you a little secret. It's not really so Jewish.
The world was created.
Yeah, the world was created, kind of, but not really. Because when you say the world is created, which biblical verse in the book of Genesis are you alluding to? Which one?
Bereshit bara Elokim.
Bereshit bara Elokim. Okay, Bereshit bara Elokim actually happened on the 25th day of Elul. What happened on the 6th day of creation? God created the first humans, Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. Originally an androgynous creature with 2 sides. Don't believe that rib story. That's a mistranslation from the Hebrew, like a lot of other things they mistranslated. Talmud says 2 sides. And then God took this 2-sided creature and decided to divide him, and he built a new and improved version. The first was called Adam, the second is called Eve, Chava. Were they Jewish?
No.
No, how could they be Jewish? The first Jew is Abraham, the first Jewess is Sarah. So they weren't Jewish. Like I said, they weren't Jewish. First Jew wasn't born for almost 1,500 years. So what are we commemorating on Rosh Hashanah? It's not even a Jewish event. There were no Jewish people around. Why is our Jewish New Year 5,780? There were no Jews around 5,780 years ago. There was Chinese eating Chinese food, no question about that. But there's no Jews
They
around.
were Jews then.
They were Jews. In seriousness, this is a real question to ask. And the answer in a word is Adam and Eve were not technically Jewish. But we don't believe that heaven is reserved only for Jews. We believe that every single human being is called to by God with a mission in life, to live a righteous life. Judaism believes in humanity. They don't believe you have to be Jewish to get saved. Now, being Jewish is very special, and we have opportunities that don't exist outside of the Jewish world, spiritual opportunities. We're not necessarily smarter or prettier or richer. There are lots of dumb Jews, trust me. Somehow I seem to know a lot of them. No offense to anybody here, you're all very brilliant. But I've come across a lot less than brilliant Jews. I've come across less than rich Jews and less than beautiful Jews, and they're just as Jewish as anybody else. So there are black Jews, there are green Jews, there are blue Jews. You name it, we got it. So what makes us different? The answer is it's not a physical thing. What makes us different is the spiritual potential that God endowed us with and the expectations He has. But the point is this. The kernel of any kind of spiritual activity necessitates a choice we make. You can't be righteous by default. There are no righteous dogs. The truth is that a Doberman Pinscher is not any more evil than a little Cocker Spaniel puppy. They're not bad, good dogs. They're just dogs. The Cocker Spaniel just covers you with kisses and love. That's what Cocker Spaniels do. And the Doberman, well, he'll bite your tuchus. That's what he does. And let me tell you something. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning and somebody breaks into your apartment, you'll be much happier to have a Doberman next to you than a Cocker Spaniel. You'll be thanking God for the Doberman. Right? But when you're in need of comfort and the Doberman comes and he growls at you, it's like, I don't need a Doberman now. So the dog isn't good or bad. The dog is just a dog. It just follows the reflexes, instincts. But people, now that's another story. There are no good dogs and bad dogs, there are good owners and bad owners. The Talmud says that dogs who behave badly is because they have bad owners. In general, animals who act out are influenced by the owners they have. If a person is evil, he spreads that evil, God forbid. And a person is kind and compassionate, it actually spreads. We have the ability to impact our environment more than we realize. The communications experts, they call this leakage. They say people leak all over the place. You can listen to what somebody says, but you can hear a whole different message. Because 80%, a minimum of 80%, is not about the words used, but about facial expression, about the language, body language, about the use of hands. That's 80% of your message. Think of a computer just reading off words. It means nothing. So getting back to the point, on Rosh Hashanah we commemorate creation, but not because it's the day God created the cosmos, or heaven and earth, because it's the day that God created the possibility to be righteous. And the possibility to be righteous necessarily includes the possibility to be evil. If you can't be evil, you can't be righteous. If you can't be bad, you can't be good. If you can't be inappropriate, you can't be appropriate. Because these are choices we make. And Adam and Eve were the first creatures that actually had a choice to make. And God set them up. He gave them a little choice to make. It wasn't even something they were supposed to do. It was something they were not supposed to do. They were just supposed to say no. There was going to be a very, very delightful looking fruit, a very seductive tree, and they were just supposed to say no, and they didn't. And we're still suffering now. We're still dealing with the fallout. This is a subject in and of itself. How can a piece of fruit do so much damage? But if you think of nuclear technology, it's not so hard to imagine that something tiny could bring about literally a world full of destruction. So that tiny act unleashed universal problems, literally a global tidal wave of challenges and issues that we still deal with till this very day. So that's Rosh Hashanah, and that's the essence of life. That's why it's our beginning of our new year again. It's the essence of our life, because our life's about making choices, my friends, making right choices and not making the wrong choices. God speaks to the Jewish people through Moses, and he says, I'm going to bring you to Israel, and I'm going to give you a choice. You have a choice. There's going to be the short-term gratification, and it leads down a very, very painful and difficult road in the end. And I'm going to give you a different path, a path which is not instant gratification or instant joy, but it brings you a sense of fulfillment. This is called the Torah and its mitzvot, or the opposite. That's what the Bible makes it very stark, very clear. If only it would be so clear. If only it would be so obvious that ubacharta b'chaim. This is life, this is death, this is good, this is bad. If only it would be so easy. And it usually is when it's somebody else's choice to make. We notice everybody else's failures we're very quick to pick up on. But our own failures, we have a million people to blame, and nothing was our fault, and everybody else would have made the same mistake. And anyway, it wasn't so bad. It's because of somebody else's choice afterwards it became bad. Somebody else soured the milk. So this is the way God created us, and the challenge we have is actually to make the right choices. And not to have 20/20 vision when we're looking back, but to look forward, to go into life. So every year Rosh Hashanah we commemorate the birth of Adam and Eve, the creation of Adam and Eve. Incidentally, on that day, Adam and Eve they did something and they got, you fill in the blank.
Punished.
They really didn't get punished. First they got judged. They got judged. God judged them. How did he judge them? He judged them very favorably, because technically they were told, you eat it, you die. That's what they were told. What did God do? They didn't die. Adam went on to live for another 930 years. And the only reason he didn't live as 1,000 years is because he was generous with his years, and he endowed King David with 70 years. It was supposed to be a stillborn baby, but that's a subject for another night. So God judged them. The first time Rosh Hashanah was a day of judgment was 5,780 years ago. And the first time we would judge favorably. And guess what? We hope and pray that we would judge favorably as well this year. We hope and pray that all of us, Adam and Eve's descendants, got cut some slack, because none of us were perfect in the past year. And as God was kind to them, we say, judge us with rachamim, with mercy. And what happened then? They were granted reprieve. It says they were on the outs with God for 7 days, and then on Yom Kippur, God was reconciled with Adam and Eve. But that's not such a Jewish event. The real Jewish event is that when we, the Jewish people, got to Torah, all those years later, a short 40 days afterwards, we made the dumbest decision of all time. This definitely holds the championship for the dumbest decision of all time. The building of a golden calf at the foot of Mount Sinai, where 40 days earlier we heard from God himself, don't make any other gods. Which part of that did you not understand? Don't make, I am your God, don't make any other gods. We made another God. Right there. It's like awful. And what was supposed to happen? God told Moses, I'm done. I'll make a new people. It's okay. I got time. God has all the time in the world. And Moses goes to bat for us. He's the greatest advocate ever to walk the face of the earth. And he gets God to grant us reprieve. And what happens? What happens is that after that first 40 days and nights, Moses goes for another 40 days and 40 nights. And it's a very grim 40 days and 40 nights. It's not a happy time. By the way, Teshuvah is smack in the middle of that. It's remained an unhappy time. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down and then goes back up the mountain on Rosh Chodesh Elul. And Rosh Chodesh Elul is called a time of divine grace. We start our Jewish New Year off with divine grace, with divine compassion, with divine kindness, a time we're close to God. So for 30 days of Elul, we're closer to God because we were closer to God then. God was in the process of granting us full reprieve. And on the 40th day, which is the 10th day of the New Year on Yom Kippur, Moses came down from the mountain and he had a message. What was the message? Just 2 words. But maybe the most powerful 2 words a nation ever heard. Salachti kidvarech. I have forgiven them as per your request. You asked, I forgive. So that's 3,331 years ago. God forgives us as a nation. What happens each and every single year? God forgives us all over again. Now, one moment. Let's stop for a second here. When the Jewish people built the golden calf and Moses came down and smashed the Decalogue, the Luchot, and he yelled and screamed and told the people they were finished, would they laugh in his face? Or did they express extraordinary remorse? The latter, of course. They were very remorseful. They begged God's forgiveness. They were miserable. They didn't know what the future was going to bring. Eventually, because they did Teshuvah, because they returned to God, what does God do? God forgives them. Let me ask you a question. Here, Rabbi Yehuda, the great prince, the great teacher of Torah, the great inspiration of the Jewish people, comes along and says, Yom Kippur, yeah, it's just like no problem. God just takes you, wipes you clean. That's all. No clean up. Beautiful, clean. But we didn't do anything. It doesn't matter. It actually doesn't matter. Do you know Rabbi Yehuda says, unless you violate Yom Kippur, so if you violate Yom Kippur, you're throwing Yom Kippur back in God's face. But if you just behave like a good Jew is supposed to behave, you follow Yom Kippur. Stay in bed all day, but you didn't do anything you're not supposed to do. That's it. Come out clean as a whistle. What does that mean? How could such a thing be? It's diametrically opposed to everything Judaism stands for. So, of course, they had to disagree with him, right? Like, nobody could agree with that. So here's the good news. You're right. All the rabbis, despite their enormous respect for Rabbi Yehuda, they said, Rebbe, sorry, we don't see it that way. Impossible. You cannot just get forgiven. You can't just get clean. You have to do Teshuvah. Yom Kippur is indeed atones, but you have to do Teshuvah. Who's the halacha going to be like? Rabbi Yehuda has it's a great approach, no? Don't do anything, you get... No, but the rabbi said we can't accept that. It's a Torah idea, but it doesn't work in real time. And so the halacha is, you have to do Teshuvah. You do Teshuvah, and then you get forgiven. Which brings us back to our original question. But if you do Teshuvah any day of the year, you get forgiven. So what's Yom Kippur? The whole Yom Kippur doesn't seem to make sense. If Yehuda says, do nothing, you get clean. The Chacham say, do Teshuvah. I say, do Teshuvah any day. If you do Teshuvah on Chanukah, it doesn't work. If you eat latkes on Rosh Hashanah, it does nothing for you. If you eat matzah on Shavuot, it does nothing for you. Take a bath in cheesecake on Shavuot. It does nothing for you. There's certain mitzvahs, a certain time of the year. But Teshuvah is universal. You're supposed to do Teshuvah the moment you sin. You're supposed to do Teshuvah. Here's the funniest thing. Maimonides, the Rambam, in the 3rd chapter of Teshuvah, he says, that Rabbi Yehuda, holds like this. We don't rule like that. He rules like the Rabbanim, like the sages. Says no. If you want to do Teshuvah, it has to be done the real deal. And then he says an amazing thing. Do you know why doing Teshuvah works? Says Rambam. V'itzumo shel yom mechaper. He rules like the Chachamim. He rules like the sages, but he invokes the logic of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, which is actually counterintuitive. He said the rabbis were right, you have to do tshuva, but then he's repeating the words of Rabbi Yehuda, which there's a magic, something happens on this day. So the way our Rebbe said it, no, he says clearly, the Chachamim don't disagree with the Rebbe about the idea of Yitzuma Shel Yom HaChaper. Yitzuma Shel Yom, the essence of Yom Kippur's magic is magic. It's just that Rabbi Yehuda said you get it for free, and the Rabbanan said you have to put yourself in the situation to be able to receive this gift. It's a gift, but you have to do something to get it. Not that the gift you're going to get is commensurate with the effort you're going to put in. You do tshuva any day of the year, God forgives you. You do tshuva before Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur is the greatest gift. But you have to pony up. You gotta meet God, like not halfway, but some way. You have to prepare yourself. Say, I'm ready to receive it. And how do you receive it? By doing tshuva, which means even the Rabbanan also held that there's something called Yitzum Shel Yom, the essence of the day. And the question, of course, is, so what is that? Okay, so not in a word, but in a few words, this is how the Rebbe explained it. He said like this. Let's talk about relationships. You all have different relationships in life. Some of them are good relationships, some of them are difficult relationships, some relationships you enjoy, some cause you tremendous heartache. Relationships. Every relationship has its currency. If you come to a country with the wrong currency, you're not going to be able to purchase anything. You don't have buying power. It doesn't work. So, but in Canada, this is money. Well, that's great. Welcome to Bangladesh. We don't know what your money is, and it's not going to work. Find a way to change your currency. This is the currency that we deal with. You want to do business here, you need our currency. Every relationship has currency. The currency of a professional relationship is professional. The currency of a familial relationship is familial. The currency of a sibling relationship is sibling. The currency of a marital relationship, well, it's marital. Imagine, God forbid for a moment, if people start to mix up the currency of these relationships. It's a disaster. Now you look like Bill Clinton. It doesn't work. That's not the right currency. Intimacy is wonderful, yes, with your spouse. What are you doing? In fact, that's called violating trust. You're a powerful public figure. You don't do that. If you're a physician, the currency of the relationship between a patient and a doctor is patient-doctor relationship. The doctor's here to heal the patient. What if the doctor's reading poetry to the patient? He says, I'd like to read your poetry. Doctor, could you please deal with my... forget your issue. Let's talk about poetry. We share a love for poetry, and we share a love for art. Who'll be my art buddy? So listen, doctor, thank you very much. Find an art buddy somewhere else. You heal me, or I'm going to the next one. Why? Because that's the currency of the relationship. It just doesn't work otherwise. Every relationship has its currency. A sibling is a sibling, a parent is a parent. If you treat your parents like a sibling, you got a problem. It doesn't work. So, what's the currency of our relationship with God? Well, it's like the currency of any relationship. Every relationship is a give and take. Why do people have relationships with people, with other people? Why do they connect with other people? Why do they spend time with other people? Because there's something of interest, something in common. I have business partners. Why do I have business partners? Because every time I meet them, I lose money. No, those are not my business partners anymore. They were my business partners. I found new business partners. Why? Because I'm in business to make money. But we had so much fun. I know. So when I look for friends, I'll call you up. And now I want to make money. And because you're not helping me make money, I have no desire to have any of that professional relationship with you. That's not what business relationships are looking for. People say, don't mix business and pleasure. Not a bad idea. It's not the currency of the relationship. So every relationship is a give and take. In every relationship, you're contributing something, you're giving, and you're receiving. A relationship in which you only give but receive nothing in return is a very problematic relationship. So a relationship in which I'm just getting and never giving anything is called dependency. It's a very unhealthy relationship. It's a bad relationship. I've counseled numerous people who told me they were in a relationship in which they felt that they were being depended upon. As many years ago, one woman once told me, I was trying to help her work out a relationship. She said, you know what? I already have 3 children. This guy I'm dating, he's like depending on me. It's toxic. I can't deal with it. I said, okay, in that case, it's not for you. Didn't work. In every relationship, you have to be able to give something, because that's how we feel good as human beings. We give, we take. To take is a gift. To be able to receive, it's not easy. Not everybody can give you criticism. You won't take it from them. Not everybody's compliments will you value. You value somebody's compliments because they actually have something to offer. They have something to give. If somebody has expertise in an area and says, you know, I'm an expert, and I want to tell you, did a really good job. I say, well, thank you, that means a lot to me. Person comes to me and says, I have no clue what you're doing. I don't know what you're involved with, but I want to tell you, I think you did a really good job. It's not a compliment. I didn't get anything from that. So when we get into relationships, there's something that we give and take. Guess what? On some level, we can't fully understand this, but God has a relationship with us. And do you know that that relationship involves a give and a take? God gives us life and health and all kinds of other gifts, but we make a contribution too. We act righteously. We go against the path of greater resistance. We overcome challenges. We restrain ourselves from lashing out at others, and God appreciates that. Just like you as a parent appreciate when 2 siblings are fighting and one sibling bites his lip and says, I'm not going to lash out. I'm not going to fight with my sibling. And how does the parent feel? Fantastic. So thank you for giving me nachas. You made me feel so good. You know, it was giving me such grief to see my kids fight, and I know your siblings behaved inappropriately, but you've given me a gift by just swallowing and ending the war, ending the battle, burying the hatchet. You actually given something to your parents. You didn't give them anything. You gave in to your sibling. Of course, in an appropriate, not abusive way. But then you would have given something to your parent. God says it's Avinu Avarachman, it's a merciful father. Obviously a euphemism. Anthropomorphism on steroids. Makes no sense really. Why God might need us, we don't understand. No theologian, none, can really explain that because we don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to our human minds. If God is omnipotent, if God has everything, they can't need anything. And if he needs anything, he's not omnipotent. So really, the notion of relationship between us and God is a non-starter. It's impossible. Because in every relationship we have something to contribute. It's not a joke. We say, I'll make believe you're making a contribution. The moment you realize that the person is actually making believe they appreciate what you have, but doesn't need you, you feel stupid. You feel like an extra finger. But God says, no, you're not an extra finger. I need you. I love you. I care about you. Why does God need love and care about me? I don't understand that. I wouldn't love, need, and care of me if I was God. You're right, but you're not God. So we don't understand God. There's a lot of things we don't understand. But we have this on faith that God tells us, I love you, I care about you, I need you, you make a contribution to me. When you live right, it touches me, says God. And that's the relationship we have with God. By the way, what I just described to you is called in the vernacular Torah and mitzvahs, also known as Yiddishkeit in French. It's Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit, that's our relationship. Sometimes in a relationship we fumble the ball. Sometimes we blow it. We do things inappropriate. But then we feel bad afterwards. So that remorse, the regret that we feel afterwards is kind of the lingering, the relationship. Really, the relationship's kind of trashed, kind of destroyed it. We offended our partner in whatever relationship wasn't a terrible way, let them down terribly. But the fact that we're able still to regret this and we yearn to rebuild that relationship, so it's kind of like the flip side of the coin. The relationship is still there insofar as it bothers me that I lost the relationship. I lost the relationship, but I'd like to get it back. I'm yearning for it. So it was there in a very beautiful way, and I lost it, and now I'm yearning and craving to get it back. And the fact that somebody who you had a close relationship with, whatever kind of relationship it was, and you had a terrible falling out, and the person wants to get back into that relationship with you, how does it make you feel? It's nice. It's nice when people are contrite with sincerity, and they're not planning to do the same thing to you, right after. Yeah, it's touching. It's actually nice. So that still works. The first thing I described to you is Torah and mitzvahs. The second thing I described to you is Teshuvah. But what if I tell you that there's a part of our relationship that actually is not contingent on Yiddishkeit, per se? It has nothing to do with the Torah we study and mitzvahs we do. In fact, it has nothing to do with the lack of remorse or regret for the fact that we've lived a life which is antithetical to everything God wanted from us. What if I tell you that that's the third dimension of our relationship? Or what if I tell you that that dimension of our... Did I offend you?
Furious.
Oh. Another guy offended. What if I tell you that that part of the relationship is actually the most profound and powerful of all? And I'll give you a simple example. I have a colleague of mine who told me that he was counseling parents whose child had become a drug addict, an opium addict, or an opiate, and he was in the worst, stealing their money, harming his parents. And the mother and father were in this rabbi's study one night, and the mother was weeping and saying, "Rabbi, I wish my son was dead. I want my son to die. I wish him death." That's how angry they were. That's how hurt they were. That's how offended they were. And he says 3 nights later, the boy overdosed. And his parents, he came to the hospital late at night, and the parents were at the bedside. And the same woman that 3 days earlier was telling the rabbi, "I wish my son was dead," now had tears streaming down her face. And she was begging her son, come back, please don't die, please come back, please come back. Now, ask yourself, what happened from 3 nights earlier to that moment at the hospital? What happened? Did the child come back and say, "Mom, I'm sorry, I realize how bad I've been"? No. What happened? Why was the same mother who wished her child death now crying even more so, praying that her child would come back alive? Tragically, he didn't. But why was the mother crying like that? Do you know why? Because there's a part of the relationship that's deeper than the currency of what they share or don't share. Here, the relationship was a negative one. The child was inflicting pain upon his parents, hurting his parents. His parents were angry. They even hated him. But underneath all that hate, they still loved him. Do you know why? Because he's their child. Because he's their child. And at that moment, when they were about to lose this child, all of a sudden, what do you think about? It's my child. It's my child. I can't lose my child. And it didn't make a difference. All the other things didn't matter. You know why it didn't matter? Because a child and a parent share something deeper than the currency of the relationship. There are lots of parents and children that don't get along. And I like to say they don't like each other. It doesn't mean they don't love each other. I once dealt with a woman who had a terrible falling out with her children. And she was driving me crazy. So at some point I said to her, "Listen, you divorced your husband, why don't you just divorce your kids?" She said, "Rabbi, what are you talking about?" I said, "What do you need a degree for? Just divorce them. Give them a divorce and get rid of them. Then you'll be fine." She said, "But they're my children." I said, "They make you miserable." She said, "Rabbi, what is wrong with you? I can't ever divorce my children." I say, "Divorce your husband?" She says, "Yeah, him I divorced, them I can't." That's the point. On Rosh Hashanah we say, Im Kibanim. Im Kibanim speaks about the relationship that we have with God, which is more profound than the things we do or don't do. Every year in Yom Kippur, it's like that moment at the bedside. Every year in Yom Kippur, for reasons unbeknownst to us, in a way we can't understand, the deepest essence of who we are suddenly reveals itself. And that's why Jewish people experience this yearning, this homecoming, this transformative kind of thing every year in Yom Kippur. I was in Jerusalem. I used to live in Jerusalem with my wife about 22 years ago. And I was teaching a class one morning in a little shul, just off the market, the Yafo, the market in Yafo. It's a little shul called Batirand, Mendel shul. I used to daven every morning. I had a little class. What was unique about my class, I was teaching Hasidus in English. And these Yerushalmi Jews would come around, they couldn't get over what was going on with this. Guys, teaching, speaking about, seems to be very holy things, but it's in such a profane language, English, that was like, couldn't wrap their heads around it. And there was one fellow who would come to my class every single morning. And as I would finish teaching, we'd go straight into davening, and after davening he'd leave, and I didn't know what his name was. He sat there for a half hour studying Torah with me every single morning. It's going on for months. And I didn't even know his name. Many months after sitting there, he didn't have to run one day, and I didn't have to run, and he introduced himself and told me his name. And he says to me, "Rabbi, do you know Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz? Aloha Shalom. You know Schwartzy?" I said, "Yes, I do know Schwartzy. I know his children. I know." He says, "Yeah, I used to study with Schwartzy years ago in USC, University of Southern California, UCLA," he says. And then I became observant, and he starts telling me his whole story. And he tells me the following story, and I later corroborated it with Rabbi Schwartz. And the story was that he was on the faculty of law. He was a law professor at UCLA. And Rabbi Schwartz was there for the students, but he would give a class for the faculty once a week. And there was one fellow who was a psychologist and a professor of anthropology who had written multiple books about atheism. A Jew. And he, of course, would never come to the class, like he was. And then one day in November, he shows up at the class. And Rabbi Schwartz is shocked. He's like, he doesn't say a word, just sits there and listens. And he comes back a third week and a fourth week, and this fellow, he's telling me he was there. So after a number of weeks, Rabbi Schwartz finally plots. He said, Dr. So-and-so, I know who you are, you know who I am. What's going on over here? Why did you start coming to the class? He said, listen, Schwartzy, I got to tell you something really strange happened in my practice. I can't understand it. I came here to try to figure it out. What was that? See, he was a professor during the day, and he had a practice in the evening. Psychiatrist. He said, I noticed, because he was like a copious note-taker and a scientist by nature, he said, I noticed that there's one evening every year, without fail. It's never the same day, but one evening in the fall, my practice fills up with Jews who are cracking up. And they're all Jewish, he said. I don't leave the office before midnight. Each one is having a crisis. He said, it started to drive me crazy. I couldn't figure out the common denominator. I looked at it this way, that way. It's never the same night, but it doesn't fail. There's one night in the fall when my practice fills up with all my patients who are Jewish and they're all cracking up. And he said, I figured it out. It's called Nidre night. And he said, I came to find out why. It's a very powerful story because you know what really the story tells us? That in Yom Kippur, there's something inside us that wakes up. It's the child in us. And that's why it's a day of joy. Because as a friend of mine, Rabbi Tzvi Friedman, he likes to write, he says, the Day of Atonement is should better be known as the day of at-one-ment. It's the day we're at one with God. And that's a day of joy. It's not a sad day. It's a joyous day. It's an incredible day. There's no day in which we could feel closer to Hashem than on Yom Kippur. Yes, we have to do Teshuvah. Of course you have to do Teshuvah. You have to do something. You have to put yourself in the right position. You have to line up for the car wash. You have to at least drive onto the tracks at least to get the car wash. But you didn't do much more than just, position yourself. I love Yom Kippur. It's my favorite day of the year. You think I'm crazy, but like my favorite hour of the year is Ne'ilah. I love Ne'ilah. I look forward to Ne'ilah all year. I'm not going to tell you I don't get hungry. I'm human. Of course, everybody gets hungry. But that hour of the year, I don't care that I'm hungry. The energy in the shul is amazing. And everybody's singing. And everybody's joyous. A whole year, I wait for Ne'ilah. My favorite hour of the year. And when Ne'ilah finishes, I wish we could just hold on. I wish we could keep this going. I feel so close to God that day. And sometimes I ask myself, am I just fooling myself? Is it real? I don't know. Here's what I do know. I know Yom Kippur is real. I know God is real. I know I have a neshama. I hope I'm feeling something real. But it's a joyous day. And these are special days. These are joyous days. When Mark asked me to come in, I'm not looking for things to do. That's the truth. But this is a privilege to speak to you and to share words of Torah with you. And during this time of the year, I look for every opportunity I could to connect with my fellow Jews, to share a few words of Torah, to inspire somebody else. And when I have the privilege of inspiring somebody else, it inspires me too. And this is what it's about. It's about inspiring each other. It's about preparing ourselves for a great gift that's about to come our way. The most beautiful day of the year. The happiest day of the year. The day of Yom Kippur. The day we'll be at one with Hashem. I pray that Hashem will accept whatever little bit of Teshuvah we do, and that He will give us His love and spadefuls, and that B'ezrat Hashem, He should bless us with a year that's going to be filled with happiness, a year that's going to be filled with prosperity and good health. And our brethren in Israel should be safe and secure. And it should be good news from our brothers and sisters all over the world. And the year is Tafshin Pei, and we hope for a year of Pedut, a year of redemption, a year of Shnat Pedutenu. It should be the year of our redemption. Hopefully, this will be the year God says enough is enough. It's time to bring the children home. May it be speedily in our days. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.